girls, and welcome to another episode of the Hey Girl podcast. I'm your host, Bethany Needham, and in today's episode, I get to introduce you to my dear friend, Melanie Krumrey. I got to know Melanie from speaking at a women's event that she hosted with her church and two other churches within, I believe, their denomination. And it was an incredible weekend. I just love these women from the very start. And Melanie was that woman that I remember kind of seeing from afar and just the incredible influence that she had in these women's lives as her and her husband pastored this church that's smack in the middle of all of these colleges in Massachusetts. And I just had so much respect and love for her right out of the gate. And at the risk of sounding like a fangirl, I was so excited when she said she would come on the podcast, getting to drive to her house and interview her. It was just such a blessing to me. So I'm excited for you to hear her story. I really pray and hope that it's such a blessing to you wherever you're at today. And again, just thank you so much for tuning in. I want to let you know that we are coming to the end of season 1 of Hey Girl. This has been absolutely incredible as we have been recording these last months, and Jenn and I, both of us, getting ready to head into the holiday season and all the different things, all the things that are going on in life. And girlfriend, if you're out there, you know those November, December month things, that's no joke. And so what better way for us to set an example as we talk about the importance and need for rest and to not do all the things than to ourselves take a break and enjoy a rest. And so we're going to be wrapping this up, not today, but pretty soon. We have a few more episodes, and hopefully for those of you who have to catch up, this will give you the chance to catch up with our episodes. And then we're looking forward to kicking off again in 2018 with a whole new round of interviews and women for you to get to know and to hear from. And so thank you for, again, just listening. You are so much the reason that has made this journey just awesome. And we've had so much fun, and we're excited for what God has in store for it. And we're also excited, honestly, to take a couple of months off and be with our families and do the holiday thing. And we pray the same for you, that this is a great season for you and that you get to catch your breath or really just do the things that matter. And know that we love you, and even in our time off, we will miss you, and definitely keep sending those messages, even if you're not hearing from us, because we love to hear from you, and we love those of you who have been sending in reviews and just the messages on Facebook. It means so much to us. So today, ladies, sit back, grab your hot coffee, whatever hot drink you enjoy most. If you're driving, keep your eyes on the road, but enjoy this episode with Melanie Krumrey. All right, girls, so we are here with my dear friend, Melanie Krumrey, and she has been so courageous to agree to come on, to sit in front of the microphone, which if you've never been interviewed for a podcast, we're just going to be honest, it's a little intimidating to be in front of that mic. And so, Melanie, first, would you like to say hello to our listeners?
I would love to. Hey, girls.
And thank you so much for being here. And thank you for being willing, letting me come into your home today and have you share your story and share with these ladies. I know that women are going to be blessed. I'm excited for them to hear more from you. But why don't we just start by introducing you, telling our listeners a little bit about who you are and where you come from.
My name is Melanie. I am originally from Texas. I grew up born in a small town. My parents divorced when I was 8 years old. We moved at that point to a bigger city, San Antonio. So I grew up mostly there and went to high school there, graduated high school there. Texas is my home, and went then after high school to the University of Texas in Austin, which is a really cool city to be in, and got a degree in education there. Met my husband there. we got married. We moved to Oklahoma after serving in Austin on staff with the church for a while, and then moved to Stillwater, Oklahoma for 4 years on staff at a church there, and then came here to New England about 18 years ago.
Wow.
To start a church.
That was going to be my question. So what brought you from Oklahoma here to Massachusetts?
I guess I should back up a little bit. I had become a Christian as a child. I was probably 7 or 8. I think I was probably the only Christian in my family at the time. I'm not sure. We were a church-going family, but I didn't necessarily hear the gospel at my church.
Okay.
But God just used a circumstance in my life to draw me to himself. And after that, I just, even as a child, was like copying Bible verses out of his word in a journal, getting involved with campus ministries at my high school, immediately involved in Cru, what used to be Campus Crusade.
Yeah.
At college, received incredible discipleship there from upperclassmen and then staff women. And I met my husband during that time. So he also had become a Christian in high school. And he, through the Ministry of Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and got involved in that ministry. He was not a college athlete, but got involved in that ministry once he got to the University of Texas. So we met through mutual friends in those different campus ministries. We always say that was a really special time to be at the University of Texas. I don't know if it would qualify as a little revival, but just there were hundreds of students in the ministries we were involved in. And so that's the context in which we met. We were both very involved, just independently, individually, in ministries on campus. He, one summer, had a vision to lead a summer youth ministry in his hometown, small town, Texas. He went to all the churches in the town, asked for financial support for the ministry, kind of cast the vision. They were all on board.
Wow.
And then he recruited a few college students to go and do that with him. So I had already applied to work at a summer camp. I wanted to not go home. Yeah. Home was not a happy place for me. Probably I was escaping a little bit, but also just unhealthy environment. I had an interview, and I had also then received an invitation to go and work in this youth ministry with Robert, whom I didn't know. Another girl that he recruited me. I mean, I had met him, but we didn't know each other well. I had seen him, he plays guitar. I'd seen him leading worship for the FCA meetings. Okay. And so I knew he loved Jesus, and I kind of admired him from afar. He was also a little older than me, so I just knew of him. So I was like, I don't know if I can do that, because I applied to this other camp. But then I heard from the camp that they were fully staffed and they wouldn't need me. So because I did not want to go home, I went to the girl who invited me to be a part of that summer youth ministry and said I would go. And then the very next day, Pine Cove, the camp in Texas that I had applied to work at, called me and said, actually, we would like you to come. We do have a spot that we think you would work well in. And I was so conflicted, because this was a very established, well-known Christian camp. My son actually just spent 3 summers working there. Oh, wow. It's just grown and grown. But I just knew my yes needed to be yes. And I just needed to trust that God was in this. And so I turned it down and kept my word with this friend who had recruited me to be a part of the summer youth team there. Interestingly enough, I did go. There were 2 of us girls, 3 guys. Robert, my husband now, dated the girl that recruited me.
No.
Yes.
Scandal.
Yes. Oh, yeah. We could follow that one for a while.
Oh, gosh.
Anyway, but still, I wasn't, like I said, he wasn't really on my radar. I really admired him, and he was a great leader that summer, and I grew a lot. really appreciated his teaching and his shepherding of us as a team. They dated and we just remained friends. So we had a great summer and got to see God work in a bunch of teenagers, and it was really wonderful, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, this was all leading to how we got here, right?
Yeah.
I went way back.
I love the stories of when people get together, so I think it fits well in a girl podcast. Okay. Everybody wants the background of how did you meet and get married?
Yes, that's true. I'm the same.
And now that you met him while he had another girlfriend, you kind of have to bring us all the way.
Oh yeah, it's kind of
the train has left the station.
A little scandalous, yeah. So, okay, they were dating that summer. We had a great summer. We went back to school. We went our separate ways, kind of. The three of us went to the University of Texas. The two other guys went to a different school. I really didn't see them much that year. At the end of the year, we had a little reunion. We went to a track meet because one of the guys ran track for another school. So we were like, oh, let's go see Adrian run. We were all together. And it was good. It was a good reunion. I really hadn't seen them. At the track meet, the girl that Robert was dating, I don't know if I should say her name or not. Anyway, could this get to her? Maybe.
I'm sure she's over it.
I hope so.
Do you want to use this opportunity to repent?
Yeah, so anyway, she left the track meet early. She was not happy. They had been in an argument. We finished the track meet, the rest of us students. Then Robert said, hey, could you help me with my Spanish homework? And so I was like, sure. He was really struggling with Spanish. And I had barely, I'm not fluent by any means, but I was able to help him with this class. So we walked somewhere. I helped him with his homework. He walked me back to my dorm. While we were walking, he asked me my honest opinion of his relationship with his current girlfriend. And I was kind of stunned, but kind of hoping I could say something, because I had heard that they weren't getting along well. There was a lot of conflict, but they had been hearing from Christians, but you're both Christians, so you just work it out. And so I wasn't so sure about that. And so I told him, I just hate that it's so hard right now. It just seems like when you're dating, sure, you work through conflicts, but it shouldn't be this volatile and this much tension and this much anger. So I hate that you're having to go through that, and I don't know what that means. But anyway, he broke up with her that night.
Oh. I can see why this caused.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
I had no idea until she came knocking on my door the next day, I believe, and she told me, and I was so horrified and feeling very guilty that I had caused this. But she just needed a shoulder to cry on, and so spent some time just talking through that with her.
Did she know that you'd had that conversation with him? Or okay.
I mean, I don't think so. I right. doubt that he... I'm pretty sure he didn't tell her. He'd had a similar conversation with his sister, who was concerned as well.
I was going to say, it seems like if the question came up in the first place, it was already something that he had really been processing. And
yeah, I think he was really trying to work through it with some fellow believers and and family. So I don't know how long after that it was, maybe a week. He called me and said, hey, I got to go to class at 3. Would you want to go for a walk? We didn't do coffee back then. You did go get a Coke at McDonald's or Wendy's or something. I don't know. Coffee dates weren't really a thing. This was in 1990, 91. We've been married 25 years. So I assumed he wanted to talk about his breakup and just process. And so I said, sure. We went for a walk and never brought up the relationship, never brought up the girl. And I need to say she's a wonderful woman and has been involved in ministry for years and is married and has children. And and God had a direction for each of us. But at the time, it was difficult. Went home, carried on with life. He called again the next week. Get out of class at 3. Want to go for a walk? Sure. I'm pretty. I don't know. I'm not very presumptuous. I think that's a good trait to have as far as boys go.
Yeah.
And maybe that was out of fear or some kind of insecurity. I don't know. But to assume nothing was going on was my mode. So again, I just thought maybe he just needs a friend. I'll go, I'll walk, I'll talk. And we did that. And then it ramped up to the Coke date at Wendy's. And at that date, he asked me to go see a play, Godspell. So our first date was to go to see Godspell on campus. It was a student production. And then we went out to eat. And he just asked me questions about my family and my faith and really drew me out. And but again, I was like, this is really nice, but
you still hadn't caught on yet.
Maybe I wasn't letting myself, I don't know, or I was forcing him to be very clear, which he then had to be.
Yeah.
So he walked me back to the dorm after that date, and he basically had to say, so just so you know, I'd like to date you. And my first thought was my friend, the girl that he had. We weren't that close, but I still felt responsible. Again, he'd been off my radar. I hadn't really considered dating him, but in that moment, and because of the time we'd spent together over the previous weeks, I had come to really like him and be interested in a relationship with him. So I was able to tell him that, but felt that it was going to be really hard to tell Jenny. It's her name. It's hard to not say it when you tell the story, but I did. It was the end of school, and I put it off because I really she was very hurt by the breakup. And so I knew this was going to be a really tough blow, so I put it off. But it's one of the times God has spoken to me most clearly. There's a few times where it's almost like you heard his voice. And I remember I was in my dorm bathroom cleaning the sink, pondering over this situation, and I heard God say, you have to tell her soon, because school was almost out for the summer. And I didn't want her to be shocked when we all got back to school and Melanie's in a relationship with Robert. I wrote her a letter. I took her out to eat. Didn't have the courage to give her the letter at the restaurant. Came back to my dorm, gave it to her then, and she read it, and she was very, very angry. And I was hurt in that moment too, just because she was even kind of incredulous that he would pick me. I think she thought I was making it up when I wrote the letter. Okay. So I'm not sure she believed me. So that was hard. Yeah, then it was summer. So it's kind of good to have that break. The following school year, there was some reconciliation that happened, which was good but hard. We were just being in these campus ministries. There were just some strained relationships about it, because you're hearing two sides of a story, and so it was just hard. But there were the motions of asking for forgiveness and receiving forgiveness and moving forward. So anyway, that sounds really like a downer part of the story, and it really was. It's painful, and God calls you to different paths, and often people are hurt and you're misunderstood, and so it was hard. It was a hard time.
I think it's also just that testimony, I'm a firm believer that God never wastes experiences, and for some reason we often hear the testimony of Jenny's side of that, right? Like we'll hear the story of heartbreak and going through these things, and it can be really easy to forget that there is another story on the other side of this, that there's all people within these stories. Like you said, there was probably rumors going about both sides of those, but I'm just thinking in life in general, we love the underdog story. The girl gets her heart broken, another girl, I'm putting this in quotation, swoops in and suddenly like you're villainized, yeah. Robert's villainized. And I just think it's actually kind of a unique testimony to share, like, God can work in all parties and he's not wasting on any side. And for Jenny, yeah, I'm sure it was hard and a painful experience, but I'm sure 25 years later, her perspective of what God was able to do through that season. And now you sit here and it's not like, 25 years later, what's the old, I feel like the movies, you're always like the overweight couple that's done nothing with your life. And like, they always like, the ones that you're like, oh, well, at least it didn't work out for them, is no, God was at work and he used that, and that he can even work within the mess and pain, I think is actually a really powerful testimony. And we don't get to or choose to hear the other side of those things. Yeah. And so I actually appreciate you sharing. I know it's not easy for you, but I think it's a powerful thing for people to remember, just that God's at work in all of us. Yeah. And all of us are broken people, regardless of where we find ourselves in the story.
Right. Man, I'm learning that so much, even lately. Just the brokenness that we have and that people have. Yeah, so it's crazy because that's not the end of the story. God threw us together after that. And even though we moved to Oklahoma. So we got married. We got engaged 6 months after we started dating. And we got married 9 months later. And then I had one more year of school. Robert was already on staff at a church in Austin. And so we immediately went into youth ministry. We got married on August 1st, and I'm pretty sure a week and a half to 2 weeks later, we had 50 teenagers at the beach on a youth trip. And I was sleeping with the girls, and he was sleeping with the guys. And that was just kind of set the tone for our life and ministry. Just jumping right in and being in the mix from the very beginning. And we loved it. We loved our time at that church. Mission trips, summer craziness. You just finished that.
You're speaking my language.
Small groups, discipleship, just wonderful times with teens. It was really an incredible time, and a wonderful church that supported us those first few years of marriage. So Robert's college pastor went to Oklahoma to pastor a church there. So this had been his collegiate pastor while he was a student at the University of Texas. So he went to be the head pastor at a church, Stillwater, Oklahoma State University. The church was practically on the campus, like a block. Okay. And this is Oklahoma and Texas. So you're talking, you've got 200 college students coming for Sunday school, not just the worship service. So. Wow. Just a really fun ministry with college students. We loved it. In our house all the time, Sunday lunches, small groups, trips, just really great time. My husband was in seminary, working full-time and in seminary all day on Mondays, his day off. And we had 2 babies in that time, one in Texas, one in Oklahoma, but they were very young while we were in Oklahoma. Also, while we were in Oklahoma, since Tom, the pastor there, also had connections with students at University of Texas, a student we knew was interested in finding out if he was called to ministry or not. So he wanted to come up and sort of be an intern, follow Tom around. What's it like to be a pastor? Is this what I want to be? And that person had been Jenny's next boyfriend. Oh. But they had broken up. So we thought, well, that's interesting. But we're going to just immediately have him over and just put it out on the table right from the beginning. We're all going to be working here at this church. And so we did, and we had a great time. And he was great to have on staff of the church. But during his time there, he really still cared for her. And so they ended up sort of reconciling and starting to date again. And then he was being considered for the new youth ministry job at the church. and they were planning to get married. So long story short, the four of us ended up on church staff together.
You can't make that stuff up.
I know, and it is really interesting, but I think and something our pastor said, so he sort of asked us about it, like, what do you think about this? How do you feel? And honestly, there was some hesitation because I was at home with babies, and they were both going to be in the office. So just, a little concern. And so he said, well, I think if they're still concerned, maybe there's not full reconciliation. Let's get a mediator and have the four of you guys sit down.
Oh.
So he recruited this wonderful, older, retired pastor to sit down at the table with the two of us, couples, and just talk through what happened and just kind of go through are we good? Are we right with each other? And it was good. It ended a little hard for me because I felt like there was just a comment made at the very end that kind of made the whole thing a wash to me. And I was so tempted to defend myself and I'm a big chronicler. Like, I journal and I write down all my prayers, and I have stacks of journals, and I had my journals from that time so that I could prove that I had not done anything wrong. I had not stolen him. I had not dated him secretly while they were dating. And I was so tempted to whip him out and say, I didn't do what you're saying I did. And God spoke, and he said, I know the truth. All that matters is what I know of you and your choices during that time, and you do not need to defend or justify. Just let it go. And so I did, but only that's the only reason. If his spirit was clearly speaking and stopping me from just that desire to protect myself and defend my character and my reputation. And so I don't know how long we served together, a year or a little over. And it was good. We had dinners together, went to each other's houses. It was such a Holy Spirit thing because I found myself doing things I didn't want to do necessarily, arranging ways that she could meet other women at church. I had sort of an unfair advantage. I'd been there 2 years prior after they announced their engagement and asking to see the ring. And again, it was like the Holy Spirit empowering that reconciliation, because in my flesh, I was having a hard time wanting to be her friend. And it was really beautiful to me how God worked during that time. And it was such a short time, so I can't help but think God orchestrated all of that just for further healing. And now they've been on their own journey of ministry and family, and we keep up a tiny bit, but not a lot. But I'm thankful for that crazy, weird time. So after that, my husband graduated from seminary. It took him 6 years because he was just going on Mondays, and an MDiv is a lot of hours. So and honestly, I don't know how he did it. I'm taking some grad classes now through seminary and working on a master's, and I can barely keep up with one class a semester, but somehow he was taking a full load every semester and working a full-time either youth ministry or collegiate pastor job. And we had small children, and I just don't know how I did it, but he did it. He graduated. He had always been interested in church planting. We heard a speaker at a conference we took a bunch of college students to during the summer in Glorieta, New Mexico. And this man talked about his experience with church planting, and something in my husband's spirit lit up. And partly it was his experience in Oklahoma. The best thing about Oklahoma is the people there. They're just really incredible people. We had a wonderful, wonderful time at our church, made some of our dearest friends there. But ministering on campus was a lot of inviting students to church or reaching out to share the gospel. And they're like, yeah, I go to church back home. So, I mean, I think a lot of people are aware that there's a lot of cultural Christianity there.
Right.
There's a million sincere, devoted believers, but there's also a lot of just cultural. It's just the culture to get up and go to church. There may not be a true relationship with Jesus. And I think my husband was feeling the weight of that and the obstacle of that. And so while we had this awesome, fun ministry with wonderful, believing students, as far as reaching anyone with the gospel, there was a barrier because they thought they had it. They thought they had it because their family goes to church back home. So I think hearing about church planting and having this experience at the same time, God just started calling him to that. So he would joke with me, like, I'm going to take you to, like, Minnesota where there's no church. I mean, we didn't know there's churches in Minnesota, obviously. But what, north? We're going north where there's, I know there's less reached areas of this country.
Cold and dark.
Yeah. And so I guess he was right about the M, because we ended up in Massachusetts, not Minnesota. But I think we thought, yeah, church planting is really such a awesome thing. And we'll probably do that like when we're this age. We're like when we're late 40s and our mid 50s, something like that. But as soon as he graduated, an opportunity came open, and it was a connection we had in Stillwater, Oklahoma. It was a man who had left campus ministry to come to New England, coordinate some youth collegiate ministry here, and just saw the need and reached out. And so we came up for a visit in January. We landed in Providence, Rhode Island, and it looked like we were landing on Mars. It was really something. So we spent some time in Boston, but Amherst was the place that was chosen because our denomination we're with the Southern Baptist denomination in New England. There's a Baptist Convention of New England. And so that's who they do demographic work. They target areas of need. And so this is Amherst, which is in Western Massachusetts, is a college area. So it's called the 5 College area. Main campus of UMass, Amherst College, Smith College, and Mount Holyoke College are all women, and Hampshire College. So this town size doubles this week, first week of September. The population doubles because of the students. So we came out to Amherst and visited. All I saw was darkness and snow and ice, and all my husband saw was need, and I can't wait to get here. And he just was convinced that God was calling us here. He just knew that this was the place and this was the time, even though we didn't think it was the time at first. So we had 2 children at the time, 2 little boys, 4 and 2, and we made the trek up here in our little white Stanza and started a church.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you are still leading that church.
That's right. That was 1999. So we're just starting our 19th year.
Wow. So obviously there is 19 years worth of stories and ministry, but give me kind of just a snapshot into some of what this 19 years has been, settling into a brand new culture. Where, as you described, your husband saw need and you saw ice. So really following your husband to a place where he was very convinced you were called and was not a short season and is not a short season. You're still here. But what are some of the things that you hold dear from these past 19 years?
Yeah, it's funny because even to this day, sometimes he'll say when he's telling the story, my wife and I felt called to church planting. Mel and I felt called to church planting. And after a while, I had to say, you know what? You need to speak for yourself because I didn't even know what church planting was. I I didn't have the same response to the speaker. I heard him talk about church planting, but in my mind, he was teaching the Bible. Like, it wasn't about church planting for me, but it clearly was for him. So it's kind of this joke that we have between us, like, speak for yourself. But the thing is, I have this memory of, so he was ordained at our church in Austin. And we each had to speak at the ordination service and sort of explain our calling. And this was not about church planting. This was just a call to ministry. And I knew that. I knew that that was a call on my life. And I think I just probably discovered it in college when I was involved with Crew. And then, my sophomore year, probably had an opportunity to lead a small group of women, and then was in a discipleship group with several awesome women. So my first discipler was Laura Wilcox. She was an upperclassman. And then I was in a group with Cass Monaco, who was this associate campus director, basically. And she was like it's a loving term, but I like to refer to her as the drill sergeant Bible study leader.
Yeah.
But it was because we had this particular group of girls. We'd been we had shared our faith on campus. So we'd sort of, and you always had an option, you knew what you're getting into. You're in a discipleship group. There's a higher accountability for that. And I was all about that. But we studied the book of Romans. She made us read it 50 times and keep track.
Wait, 50?
50.
Wow.
50 times. And you'd think I'd know it really well, and I'm ashamed to say that I still forget.
Well, Romans is kind of a hefty book.
Heavy.
We're going to give you a little grace on that one.
Yeah. She had us memorize 2 verses out of every chapter. And we would literally show up, and she would say, okay, Melanie, what does Romans 2, 9 through 11 say? And I would have to say, for he is not a Jew who is one outwardly. And go on with the rest of the verses. And us gals would find ourselves in the dining hall, like with our index cards, like getting ready for discipleship group that afternoon, because we knew she was going to call on us. And so that was my experience in college with ministry. And I much preferred to put hours in planning my small group time than doing my psychology homework or what have you. So I knew, I just loved it.
Yeah.
And I loved that I was trained. I just ate it up. And I loved that I was given the opportunity. And I'm getting emotional.
We do that on the podcast.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Sorry, girls. I'm so thankful for that time. So I knew I was called. So at this ordination service, I was able to say, I know I'm called to ministry. I loved it before I loved Robert. And if my husband is called, and then I believe I'm called too. I don't think he would necessarily call us in different directions. That's sort of my hang your hat moment,
Yeah.
So when we got here, and it was hard because it's a culture shock.
Yeah.
You can have that in the same country where you live. Texas is a very warm place, climate-wise, and just warm and friendly. Like, people are just chatty and just very warm and welcoming and friendly, and there is a culture of church there. So there's a safety in that. There's a comfort in that. So it was hard. I didn't know anyone. We did have another couple that we were working with that first year. So it was good. The husband of that couple had done a little work on UMass campus. So we weren't coming in totally blind, but sort of. So we did some tables on the campuses, did some flyers in town, and ended up having students come every time. Just the students came, and that was hard too, because I was lonely. I love college students. I still do. We haven't outgrown them. We thought we would, but we haven't. We're almost 50, and we still are glad that they still want to hang out with us on some level, which is good because our church is still about 2/3 college students.
Yeah.
Definitely growing, but so yeah, those first years were hard, but you're kind of just distracted by the work of the ministry. There's just so much to do. And when you're planting a church, and I've actually, I think I've heard other women on your podcast say that you just do everything. So you may not necessarily feel called to childcare or hospitality, but you do it because it's just all hands on deck. And we were really it. So the couple that we worked with the first year weren't apart after that. So we're working with these college students, and as awesome as it was also very lonely, and the culture was difficult. And the people I was meeting in the park or on the soccer field with little boys playing soccer were oftentimes living alternative lifestyles that I had never bumped into in real life. Like, I knew they existed, but I'd never been in relationship with people living such an opposite worldview and lifestyle as me. That's so good. I'm so thankful for that, but it's so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard. Yeah, a lot of just work, a lot of leading small groups, a lot of feeding people, and a lot of loneliness. And probably some depression. Yeah. I got pregnant. So we moved here in July. I got pregnant in December, and it was winter, and I was sick, and I had 2 toddlers, and I was pregnant, and I knew no one. And I would call a dear friend in Oklahoma, and say, it's 2:00 in the afternoon. I still have my PJs on, and my 2 little boys have watched PBS for like 3 hours now, and just grieving, just feeling so terrible about myself. And she would say, they're never going to remember. You need this time. Right. It's okay. It's a season. But still having to maintain the ministry pretty much on top of that. And honestly, I say having to. I think that's where I've gotten myself into some trouble in these 19 years or 18 years of ministry here, is feeling that I have to do certain things. And it's so much a part of my temperament to want to do everything, all the things. But I think I got myself into situations where I was doing things God hadn't necessarily asked of me. And so about 10 years in, I can go for a long time. I went 10 years, and then I kind of crashed. Yeah, just crashed. We still raise most of our salary. And so trips home were all about fundraising. And yeah, I was doing a Beth Moore study on one of those trips at the 10-year mark. I'm a very faithful Bible reader, journaler. I know I sound like a really good girl when I say stuff like that, but it's just never been an issue for me. Right. I love to go to the Word. I love my time, and somehow I've always been able to fit it in. So even on this fundraising trip, I'm like in the passenger seat working on my Beth Moore Bible study. And one of the questions was, when is a time in your life when God has required a lot of faith from you? And I was racking my brain, like, I don't know. I mean, moving to Massachusetts and planting a church, yeah, that required faith. Buying this house that we're currently in, that required faith. It seemed really impossible. But I mean, those didn't seem to be getting at the heart of when's the time God's really asked faith of you. And when that thought came to mind, then the tears started to come, and I thought, right now. It's right now. It's by faith that I'm going on this road trip to Oklahoma to raise more money and make more appearances and more churches. And it's by faith that I'm getting out of bed and feeding these kids their breakfast and their lunch and their dinner and loading them up in the car and sleeping in a different person's house every 3 nights. And it's by faith that I'll have to go back to Massachusetts in a couple weeks and face life there. And it was really, it was really hard.
Wow.
it did sort of send me into a very depressed low for about 3 months. And I told my husband, and he was so understanding, and I basically stayed in bed till about 9 or 10 every morning for about that long. He'd bring me a cup of tea. I'd sit with my Bible, my journal. He'd slip a little note card under the door with a scripture on it. I have a stack of, I don't know how many. I don't know, 50, 75, with just a scripture of encouragement, of truth, of hope. Just sort of let me have the time. And then after that, I missed church like 4 times in a row. And I think I might have even prided myself on never having missed a Sunday. In Texas, in Oklahoma, once we moved here, like I'm there, I'm committed to this, but I couldn't do it. And so 4 times was a really big deal for me. And I'm the pastor's wife. So, but there was grace for that. Yeah, after 2 or 3 months, I was able to just function better and be a little more hopeful and joyful. But it took a while. It took in fact, it's been very recent that I feel like God's met me with full joy and healing in that. I would run with this dear friend every Thursday morning. My friend Betsy and she's on staff with Crew. She's crazy. She makes me do crazy things. And so we'd meet at 6 a.m. down the street here. We'd go for like a 4 or 5 mile run. It was our hour to catch up, to pray, to hear how we were doing, talk ministry. And she was one of the ones who was really faithful to, not every week, but probably once a month, every other week, say, how are you doing? Do you feel better yet? Is it lifted yet? And I would say, no, not really. I mean, I'm okay. I'm okay. I still love Jesus. I love his word. I love church. I love my kids. I love my home. I mean, I'm okay, but I don't feel like there's this big turn. Like I'm not just free of the despair and the depression that came at that time. But I felt like God was saying to me, asking of me, just trust me. Just trust me. It's coming. Keep doing what you're doing. And I did. He would meet me in his word, just without fail. And that's really precious to me. And he does this other precious thing where I'll be struggling, I'll be feeling down, or I'll have be really discouraged about a situation or a person, and he sends me notes in the mail from random people. I'll just be so down, so discouraged, and thinking, this is never going to lift. And a note from a former student or a fellow mom or someone from 10 years ago will arrive in my mailbox, and it's like this little gift big gift from God. Yeah, the treasure of his word and the kindness of people has carried me.
I was thinking as you were talking, and I think you just answered it right there, but was this, this level of depression, even though you described, I love my house, it's not like I'm miserable in everything, but was it just enough to reset your rhythms and your expectations on yourself? And you talked about I prided myself on never skipping church and then missed 4 weeks in a row, and 6 to 8 years of, sometimes we love that quick fix. We just, got him in a bad place and give me that, is it the 5-minute abs and my chocolate cake? But what is it? What were those rhythms you said, this changing of patterns, different things that you put into place, the flow of your day? Were there certain things, decisions, maybe even just practical ones that you made that kind of really shifted that for you and being in a healthier place, in a more joyful place? Yeah.
So I was already a runner. That's always feels weird to say. Started running again a little bit when my oldest was around 12. mostly because when our kids are 12, we challenge them to a list of challenges in the realm of their physical life and their academic life and their spiritual life and their life of practical skills. So one of the things on his list was to run a 5K. So we trained together, my 12-year-old and I, and that's when I started running a little bit more. So around the same time, I went to see my doctor, and it was just a regular checkup. I wasn't going to see him because of depression, but I did say, I've been kind of low lately, and just sort of described what had been going on. And he said, I can prescribe you something for that right now, but there's a few other things you could try. And one of them is exercise. And he said, and I'm not talking like a 20-minute walk around the block. I'm talking heart pumping, you sweat, exercise. And so he said, whatever you want to do. And I said, okay, I'm going to try that first. And so running has been a huge thing. And I know it's a love-hate relationship. I get it. And I know there's many people out there who cannot relate to this at all. But there are definitely
runners that are listening, I guarantee you.
And there is just something about it that I can clear my mind. I can pray. I don't like to run in circles, so I don't run on a track. I just go.
Right.
And I love that I can just walk out my door and go. And this is a beautiful place to run. That is one thing I love about New England, as difficult as the culture was to adjust to and the temperature. This is a beautiful part of the country, and I feel so fortunate. Every season, I'm like, thank you, God. Well, 3 seasons.
I was going to be like,
thank you,
winter,
God.
Not so much fun to run in.
No, that's when I have to bring it indoors and be on the treadmill, and that's no fun. Yeah. But that's when I listen to podcasts, so hey.
There you go.
So running was it was a big thing, and it still is. And then a lot of the same things. So just scripture read. I know it's like the answer, pray and read your Bible, but it really is the formula, right?
Yeah.
It really is how you hear from God and how
There's a reason cliches are cliche, right? Because when it's the answer, we can look a million other directions, but
right.
We miss what it actually is, trying to make it fancier than it is.
Yeah. So the other thing, my husband and I we've struggled because when you're both in ministry, you can probably relate to this. You're like, often feel like you're just business partners rather than a married couple. And so we started implementing a few little habits. We run together most of the time. On Mondays, we run together. We come home. We go to Whole Foods for breakfast. We talk about what does the week look like? How are you doing? We pray. So that was a new thing. And he realized that. He's like, you know what? We're so focused on ministry and serving. We're not focused enough on our own marriage, and we've got to cultivate that. So we started doing that. Things like that. Getting away overnight every now and then, things like that. I also, which for me and my temperament is a weird and hard thing to do, but I went to the library and I checked out a book on self-care, and I thought, this is like the most selfish, crazy, new age, I don't know, thing. I just had all these perceptions of that world.
Girl, you're preaching to the choir, but isn't that just the lie of the enemy that it's a selfish thing to take care of ourselves?
Yeah. I don't even remember who the author was, but it was a very sweet book. Nothing crazy like I feared. And one of the things, and this sounds so crazy, but maybe someone can relate, that was a sign that you aren't practicing self-care was that you don't take time to go to the bathroom. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've done that since high school. Like I was so involved in high school and did everything in all the clubs, and college, everything in all the clubs, and ministry, everything in all the events. And I will deny myself that very basic need and wait and put it off and put it off. And I thought, she's reading my mail. She knows that what I'm doing. And so I just that, I know it sounds so crazy, and I'm kind of embarrassed to even say it, but taking time to do this very simple thing was something that I needed to do. And then other little things like that you just deny yourself certain, small pleasures, small luxuries, as if, going to the bathroom is one of those. But for me, it had become that. It's so weird.
I feel like as a women's podcast, the thing that gets in my mind is the luxury is being able to put off going to the bathroom once you've had children.
Oh, that's true.
Because there's the other side of, sometimes I just don't get to choose when I'm going.
No.
It's happening. It's on. Whether or not you make it to the bathroom is a whole nother battle. But
and be careful about that laughing and sneezing.
Yes. I'm just picturing you're a runner, you've had kids, and yet somehow you still get to choose when you go to the bathroom. I'm a little jealous, not gonna lie. Oh, well, honestly, none of those sound crazy. They all, I love, this has been for me recently, very much an ongoing theme is what does it look like to care for ourselves and how important that is, because the things that God has called us to do, if we just completely ignore the limitations and boundaries that he has put on us naturally, we are human beings and our bodies do break down if we don't take care of them. And I'm sure you can testify, you can only go so long without going to the bathroom. These things, they're things that have to be done. And if we don't care for those things, then ultimately we're not serving other people because, at least in my case, then you end up even more sick and it knocks you out and you're no good to anybody. Right. And so I appreciate you sharing just that side of it. A question that came to mind in this transition again, is there anything right now in this stage of life that you are not doing that maybe you were very involved in before, but it's one of those things that you're like, okay, for this season, for this time, in an interest of self-care and also doing what God's called you to do, but not what God has not called you to do. Is there anything you can think of that has been a no for you in this season?
Yeah, I think so. And again, this is such a struggle for me. No is a struggle. And I know it is for a lot of people, I think especially women. I also just love the life that God's called us to. So I hate saying no to things. I really do. But I did it this week. So we had a prayer service at church on Wednesday night. There was also an opportunity to pray on every one of the 5 campuses, to go prayer walking all day Wednesday. And I wanted to do it all. I want to prayer walk on those campuses. I want to join with the other ministries. I love that. I love joining with others and covering those bases and in anticipation of what God's going to do. But I had to say no to the all-day prayer walking on all the campuses and just participate in the Wednesday night. And that was hard. So that's one small example. I guess broader examples would be when you're planting a church, you do everything. So you're doing the nursery in case any kids show up that day, because who knows, they might. You're cooking all the meals for any kind of fellowship, and we had college students, so potlucks. One time, a couple people for a potluck brought an oversized bag of animal crackers. And I'm like, guys, this is not appropriate potluck, but come on. Anyway.
Are you teaching them how, let me teach you how to do the potluck thing?
Yeah. So you just kind of do it. They need to eat, and college students love to eat, and I honestly love to feed people. So I still have control issues about food and what people eat and how it's presented, as the other women on our church staff will tell you. But I am not on that committee. I'm not in the kitchen at church every week or for every event, whereas I used to be.
I have one more question for you. And it's a little off topic from everything we've talked about, but I do think it's important for us to know this about you. And I gave you a heads up on this one.
I know. I've been thinking about this one.
I'm amazed at how many wives ask their husbands to answer it. Did
did it
you?
this morning.
Oh, I feel like I need to just put a message out there. Husbands, do not answer this for your wife unless you have a really comfortable doghouse. So, Melanie, the question is, what is the most superficial thing about you?
Okay, so I think there's probably too many things, but I'll narrow it down to a couple. Oh, actually, you're asking me just for one. So I did ask my husband this morning on our run. I'm like, babe, the last question on every interview is, what's the most superficial thing about you? So what do you think? And
oh, no.
He's like, I don't know. I mean, I guess probably, clothes and makeup. Those would be considered superficial things, and you like those things, which I do. I like clothes. I like makeup. And that's a superficial thing that I enjoy.
You enjoy.
I just enjoy it. The other probably superficial thing is probably my music. So I love praise and worship music. I love hymns. But if you find me alone in my car or alone in my kitchen cooking, I will probably be singing at the top of my lungs to Taylor Swift because I'm a total fangirl.
Yes. Yes.
I just love her.
I don't know if you've heard, but T Swift is dead.
I heard. I'm wondering what direction. That's right.
Goodness.
Very curious about that.
Yeah. I love that because I'm right with you. I also love worship music, but yeah, I'm a very eclectic. I love my pop music and
I do too.
I mentioned this on like a way earlier podcast, but I drive my daughter to school, and one of our traditions is to jam out, and it's kind of our way to set a different tone for her day. The bus is very overwhelming for her first thing in the morning, a bunch of screaming kids. And every day could look a little different. We have songs like Mandisa, Good Morning with Toby Mac.
Yeah.
Like that's one that comes up a lot. But the two that are like the staples of our jamming are Monday morning. We play Mamas and the Papas Monday. To like, I'm so proud as a mother that my daughter knows the words and can sing to the Mamas and the Papas because that's what I grew up with. That's what my dad introduced me to. But then on Friday, we just totally swing the pendulum and do Friday by Rebecca Black, which I feel like...
How does that go?
Oh man, I don't know if I can sing it on. It's the whole, it's Friday. We're gonna get, okay, you can look it up, but then you're gonna judge me. It's basically, like I might as well just take every single mama and papa and slap them in the face because I'm insulting real music. But thank you, and I look forward to getting feedback and hearing from women because I know this is gonna mean a lot to them. Okay, girls, that was Melanie. I hope that you were as encouraged as I was hearing her story. Honestly, it's another episode that I spent time laughing. I was crying on the other side, just, my heartstrings being tugged as she shared the story of hitting that place of just needing rest and how her husband just so lovingly served her during that time of bringing her hot tea in the morning and slipping notes under her door. I absolutely loved that story, loved it. And it brought me back to the season not that long ago when I was really having a hard time with depression and just mornings were incredibly difficult to get moving. And it was when my husband started bringing the coffee pot up next to my bed and leaving it there with a mug. So when I woke up, whenever I chose to wake up and could get moving, I didn't even have to get out of bed to get my coffee. And if you know me, you know that coffee is my love language. And as much as that was a horribly difficult season for me with depression and anxiety, it was one of the most beautiful seasons of watching my husband just love me so well. And so there are so many things about Melanie's story that I would love to talk through, but I just really wanted to pause and talk to the women out there who maybe you're like me, maybe you just remember a recent season where you were in a dark place, or maybe you are in that place right now, listening to this podcast, laying in your bed, not sure how to face your day. I know that not all of us have people in our lives who are supporting us and loving us through all of these hard things. And so I wanted to pause and just talk to my sisters out there if you're feeling alone. And I want to tell you something that has been told to me again and again, and I've had to remind myself in dark times, is that we have a God that loves us exactly where we're at. It's the whole powerful truth of the gospel that God sent Jesus to us to save us. He didn't wait for us to find a way to him. He knew that we could not find a way to him. And so he sent a Savior who came to rescue us out of sin and out of this hopeless place. And the reality is we don't have to find our way to God, that God is going to meet us where we're at, that he's going to walk with us and be faithful in the journey as we walk ahead, even in the dark times and the really hard days. And I know that it doesn't feel that way on dark days. It feels like we should be able to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps or figure it out or whatever it is that voice in your head tells you. But I am telling you, as someone who's been in those days many, many times, that God is faithful and he's there with you. He's not waiting on the other side, calling you across. He's there with you, even in the darkness, and he is faithful and he is good. And so, sisters, you are not alone. And I'm just praying over you even today as you heard this story, that maybe that part of the story in Melanie's journey was something that was an encouragement to you. And maybe it's just a reminder of your friends who may walk through these. Maybe it's not something you wrestle with, but you have friends that do. And it will encourage you to how to love them well during those times. Once again, I love that we got to hear this story. I'm so grateful to Melanie for being willing to come on the podcast and share with us. And I am praying over every single one of you, myself included, that this week we will continue to run our race in our place and keep being awesome. Bye, girls.